Hello and welcome to today's palming party. This is Nathan Oxenfeld. I'm really excited to be coming to you live today on the autumnal equinox here in the Northern Hemisphere, if that's where you are tuning in from today. Not everybody's there celebrating the beginning of autumn. In the Southern Hemisphere, you might be just moving into spring. And one of my friends is actually down in South America right now. So hello, Justin. Enjoy it down there. And so, as always, on these equinoxes and solstices, I like to hop on my YouTube channel here and do a little live stream where I guide us into a palming visualization together for the purposes of relaxing our eyes, relaxing our minds, de-stressing, and maybe even noticing some benefit or improvement to the vision. And after we do our relaxation experience, then I like looking at the chat and seeing if there are any particular sharings or questions that come up. And so I am going to be embracing a lot of movement in today's palming party, which sometimes we associate palming with just kind of sitting more still, maybe not moving too much. So we are going to be kind of playing around with moving while palming physically, but also big emphasis on the mental movement. So working with imagining and remembering movement as well. And this is partially inspired by one of my teammates, June, who's been leading a course at the moment and has been getting all these people doing lots of swaying and swinging and moving, even while at the computer. So it's been really exciting to see these people that went through my teacher training program and are now teaching and working with people individually are now starting these class series, these group class series online. So June is already through three classes out of 4 and condensed into 2 weeks, kind of a cool new format to get a real jump start on your practice routines. And my other team member, Nalini, is going to be starting hers in about 2 weeks, diving even deeper into lots of these more mental and psychological aspects of natural vision improvement, which is really exciting to kind of involve this more holistic approach to everything that's happening. And I'm also offering some class series as well. First time I've ever done a class just dedicated to nearsightedness and one just dedicated to farsightedness. So I'll be doing the farsightedness one first. They're each 4 weeks long. All of the sessions just mentioned are all 4 class series. And you can find more about it at integraleyesight.com/series. So there's a link to that in the description. So if you enjoy today's palming party, you just know there's lots of upcoming opportunities to get even more involved and more structured with your home vision training, vision practice. So I'm going to encourage you to kind of prepare to go into the palming experience, which usually with these sometimes longer palming sessions between 10, 15, 20 minutes to actually have a little bit extra support, either with like a palming stick or maybe with some pillows or books or blankets. Maybe you even want to just lie down and take a little break and find a way to kind of support yourself without your shoulders getting tired. I do like to build in these little breaks, these little break periods during the palming party so that we can kind of stretch while keeping our eyes closed so that we're not, actually losing the benefit of that longer palming. So that's sort of the purpose of these palming parties, give you an excuse to go a little bit longer than maybe you do on your own. So once you're kind of situated with your setup, we are going to start to keep in mind, I did just wash my hands. So we are, putting our hands right on our face and over our eyes. So just be mindful about that. But a lot of people also like to rub their hands together first to kind of generate some heat. And as we are going into the kind of colder months and seasons, this is a really nice thing to do for your eyes and your whole body. So once you're feeling that heat and friction, you're going to go into your palming position, where I like to kind of cross the fingers of one hand over the other, over my forehead. And it's called palming because we want the center of the palms pretty much right over the center of the eyes, not so much just the fingers laying over the eyes, although that can feel nice. There's a lot of flexibility here, and I do encourage you to kind of experiment and see what feels most comfortable for you. But we are going to find ourselves in our own unique palming position, which may require a little bit of settling into. You might need to check in with different parts of your body, like your feet, and see if your feet are planted on the floor, and maybe checking in with your shoulders to see if they can kind of relax down at all anymore. Maybe certain muscles around your face, like your jaw, loosening, or maybe even starting to bring awareness to the eyes and inviting them to relax. Because we're going to be talking about intentional relaxation today and unintentional relaxation, which is tied into our visualization. Because as we complete our more kind of physical body scan to invite the physical muscles to relax in the face, the shoulders, the back, the hips, the legs, all the way down to the feet and the arms, back to the hands, kind of like cycling through your whole body and connecting your eyes into that flow. And hopefully at this point, your breath is also coming along for the relaxation ride, where the breath deepens a little bit, and maybe there's a little bit of emphasis on the exhale, the out breath. Whether you're taking a big yawn as a sign of really relaxing and just starting to oxygenate your eyes and your brain, giving them this really nice, sweet, dark rest. Or maybe you're just taking a big sigh out of the mouth to kind of settle into your body, still kind of checking in physically with the body and the breath. Or maybe you're just starting to settle into some nice nasal breathing, just in and out through the nose. In my opinion, the deep rhythmic breathing as you palm can really multiply the benefits and enhance your experience. So just keep on moving your lungs, right? We're bringing this movement into palming. So even though we're just sitting still, we're tuning into what is moving, including our lungs. The deeper and more rhythmically we breathe, the more we can feel the lungs moving, the diaphragm muscle moving. And I love kind of using my breath to then connect in with my heart, because right between the two lungs rests the heart. And something about this rhythmic breathing can also almost sort of get your heart rhythmically going along with it. So just sort of enjoying these feelings of internal movement happening inside the body as you're just paying attention to it and breathing. At any point, you are welcome to sway a little bit. Some people really like to not only just tune into these subtle internal movements, but just giving a little bit more of an apparent motion by rocking side to side or forward and back. It doesn't have to be big. It can be kind of gentle. But this is another really simple and easy way to incorporate some movement into the palming practice, turning it from something that might be a little bit more sedentary into something that's more swingy. Because a big part of the Bates method involves learning about the swinging. And this is just, we're exploring multiple versions of it today. So once we're getting our physical body continuing to relax and the breath continuing to deepen, that generally leads us more into the mind, because we can't see anything right now. Our eyes are covered up and maybe even closed. But that doesn't mean that they're just in park mode. We want to invite this movement into our eyes while we palm. So coming back to this idea of intentional versus unintentional, or conscious versus unconscious, we want to be able to explore both the intentional way to move the eyes as well as the unintentional way that the eyes just move, which is generally in response more to the visualization or what you're imagining or remembering. So maybe starting with the intentional, because that's much more straightforward, just feeling your eyes moving while you're palming. So you're not staring just straight ahead. You're feeling your eyes move up and down or side to side or bouncing around. Some people even tune into the feeling of blinking while palming as yet again another example of movement and moving. But the intention is relaxed movement, not strained or effortful movement. So that's what we're always looking for here. What's the easiest way for this to happen? That takes the least amount of effort, least amount of strain, maybe even I'm noticing the presence of relaxation while this movement is happening. So that's another thing we're doing here is connecting this movement with a sense of relaxation. And maybe it feels better than the staring. But this is the intentional movement. What about the unintentional movement? That kind of involves more of the mind. So now we come into more of our visualization, which once again has both an intentional and unintentional side. With the intentional side essentially being thinking about exactly what you want to visualize and then visualizing it. So there's that direct prompt versus the unintentional visualization is characterized more as something that happens more automatically. Maybe it feels like more you are the observer of what may seem like more random visualizations because you're not necessarily intending on them happening, but they happen. So that's more of the unconscious or subconscious side of it. Whereas the other side, the intentional side, is feeling a little bit more maybe conscious. And this is something Dr. Bates actually did write about, the difference between the conscious memory and unconscious memory. So we get to play with both. And a lot of people feel like they can't visualize because they're only looking at the conscious side. For example, if you you want to think about a pumpkin, you visualize a pumpkin, and there's this direct link. But if you don't visualize a pumpkin, you might feel like, oh, well, I can't do this because I'm thinking about a pumpkin, but I'm not visualizing it or I'm not, quote, seeing it. So it's a good reminder that you can't see anything right now because your eyes are closed and covered, but you can remember things and imagine things. And let's say something else came into your mind more randomly that you did not intend on. Say, for example, some other random vegetable or fruit or something that you hadn't been thinking about, but it felt like it just kind of appeared. That may already be happening in your mind or throughout your day, but maybe we're just not considering it visualization because it's not feeling so direct. But it's worth exploring. So sometimes that's what these palming parties can be really good for, is to get into the kind of longer palming session and have time for both sides of it. The more intentional, conscious side of I'm thinking about a pumpkin and I'm imagining seeing a pumpkin and kind of playing with that side of it, or settling into the other side of it, of just relaxing into the palming and trusting that something's going to pop up, might be random, but you just get to kind of observe that and receive that and play with that side of it. But before we go a little bit further into that, might be a good time for a quick little stretch break. Like I mentioned at the start, we can kind of extend this relaxation by just keeping the eyes closed as we remove one hand from the face if we feel like we want to kind of stretch out that hand, and we'll do the other side here in a moment. But I like opening and closing my fists and doing little wrist rolls and circles. And sometimes I will also reach that arm up towards the sky, do a little bit of a kind of side bend or stretching out, just whatever feels good, being mindful of your surroundings. Because we're going to just go back into another little session of palming, but sometimes it's nice to break it up. Keeping the eyes closed kind of helps you bridge this gap where you're not necessarily just opening back up. So once you have stretched that one side, then you can switch and then cover up the other eye and do those stretches either of your hands or your wrists or arms or full body, whatever feels good. Just doing your best to keep the eyes closed. And just stretching long enough so that you can kind of quickly get back into the palming, back into that nice, deep, dark place that you've generated. Something really interesting happens in the eyes when we put them in the dark like this. There can be some nice healing and regeneration that happens either when we're palming or even just in the dark. I just finished up teaching a 4-day vision retreat here in Vermont, and we did a night vision walk in the woods in the dark with no flashlights and gave our eyes a chance to adapt to the darkness. And it's a little bit more of an active way to work with this darkness and the night vision and the periphery and everything. But that's another reason why I was inspired to bring some more movement into today's palming party as one of the big emphasis here, because of how much different it felt walking in the woods in the dark and that movement of the body through space while being in that darkness. Whereas all this palming, we're generally kind of seated or even lying down. So the body's not really moving too much, but we can get it to with, once again, just a little bit of that swaying side to side, rocking forward and back, little circles, little infinity signs, lazy eights, whatever feels like it's calling you. Or if you are feeling more called towards just staying more still, there's so many different ways you can do this and customize it. But for the rest of this time in palming, I'm just going to be giving you a few ideas to either stimulate that more intentional or conscious side of your visualization, or maybe it'll do something to stimulate the unintentional or more unconscious side of the visualization. Because sometimes it helps to just have a little bit of guidance, a little bit of a voice to follow. And all we're doing is inviting the mind to enjoy these mental pictures. We're kind of switching from our eyesight mode into our insight mode and allowing the mind to envision these things, not putting any pressure on the eyes to do anything, except maybe they move in response to these visualizations. So thinking about various things that may innately move. Generally, one of the first places my mind goes is to nature. There's just so much movement happening outdoors in nature. And so just tuning into my hearing right now, I'm hearing birds out the window. And so I'm just envisioning what a bird might look like flying through the sky from one part of the building to another, using a combination of my memory of just remembering what various birds look like, as well as my imagination of imagining what this bird might look like, especially while it's moving through the sky. The wings are flapping, and maybe I can add more with my imagination to make it even easier or more interesting for my mind to kind of conjure up this mental movie. Like maybe as the bird flies, one of its feathers falls off and begins to flutter down to the ground very slowly and softly. And I'm just watching it, just floating down. And since it is beginning the autumn season here in the Northern Hemisphere, maybe we feel like envisioning some autumn leaves falling from the trees. Just one by one, Or maybe there's multiple falling all at the same time and you kind of flitter your attention from one to the other. And just kind of picking out the colors of these leaves. Maybe some of them are yellow, maybe some are even red, orange. In one of our classes earlier today, someone was sharing how much they enjoy walking on the beach. And that's a place of constant movement with the waves. A lot of people enjoy just thinking about being on the beach, being on the ocean, seeing the waves, hearing the waves crashing, smelling the ocean smells. Also, lots of birds there, the seagulls and the pelicans. And that's just the seawater, the salt water in the ocean. There's a lot of cool ways to imagine the fresh water moving, whether just through a stream or a river or some sort of waterfall or pool. Water's got a lot of movement to it, so a lot of times that can stimulate some kind of either conscious movement of your eyes to follow where that water's headed, or maybe some kind of unconscious movement. Maybe it's a very subtle movement that's actually getting the waters inside your eyes to move. Because remember, your eyes are primarily made of liquid. So imagining all this movement and actually inviting the eyes to move and get out of that stationary parked staring mode, it's increasing lots of fluid movement and circulation that can be very beneficial to the eye. So that's how we think about healthy eyes, is really connected and plugged in with all the systems, the circulatory system, the lymphatic system. And the lymphatic system in particular needs a lot of movement to keep on flowing. So that's actually what we're getting while we palm. And the darkness and the heat are just helping with that, to open up all those channels and create this really nice environment for your eyes to be doing lots of little movements and adjustments, even though there's nothing to physically see. That's why we're using our imagination, our memory, to pretend like we're seeing a bird or a beach or a leaf. Even though we're not physically seeing it, sometimes even just the thought of it will initiate the same exact kind of movements that your eyes would want to be making if you were looking at it physically. So it's almost a cool way to practice seeing things clearly with the naked eye through all these extra movements that they start to make, as opposed to just staring at stuff and things get all blurry. So that's just one of the basic things that Dr. Bates discovered in people who had really good natural eyesight, is their eyes were moving a lot, just constantly adjusting, not in a very big noticeable way, just these nice, easy, gentle, subtle shifts and blinks. So that's what we're getting back by practicing the Bates method, is just these easy, natural, simple vision habits that take no effort to maintain. Eventually, they just become the new way you use your eyes all the time. And even getting to the point where you don't really even need to palm your eyes so much anymore, because you're just using them correctly and it feels so much easier and better, that we don't need to take breaks or palm the eyes as much to practice these good habits, because we've gotten the good habits. But there's nothing wrong with repeating these practices and really finding our own way with it. It's not a cookie cutter approach. Even though we're all doing the same practice right now of palming, we've all been envisioning our own unique visualizations. So that's what we really get to lean into here, is just how individualized each one of us is and how unique our approach can really be with the vision practice. So that might be just something cool to share in the YouTube chat once our palming period finishes. If there were any other particular moving images that popped into your mind, either other animals or other scenes, because what just comes up naturally and easily for you is generally the right thing and what you are meant to be really just letting play in the mind, and you just become the observer of it. And as you observe it, your eyes move without you having to do that more kind of conscious, intentional version of it, of continuing to make the eyes move around. It just starts to feel like, oh, my eyes are moving in response to this mental movie that's playing in my mind, being kind of fueled by this imagination and memory centers in the brain. Not really so much the eyes. The eyes are just relaxing and adjusting and shifting. And maybe if you feel that while you palm, you can even start to feel that when you're not palming. And so now I'm going to just begin to very gradually and slowly transition out of palming by keeping my eyes closed, but removing my palms from my face and moving my head side to side so that I'm exposing my closed eyelids to varying degrees of light. And only when they feel kind of adjusted again and more ready and comfortable to flip back open, I just do some blinking and shifting around and just taking in what comes instantly and easily and naturally. Right, we're kind of looking for these feelings of not having to strain to see, but just to relax and let the eyes kind of move around in response to either what is moving out in front of us, which, depending on where you are, there may or may not be that much movement. There might be some movement on the screen of me moving around, but what about your environment? Is there stuff going on in the background or in your peripheral vision that might be moving and stimulating some of that shifting of the eyes? So that's another just thing about these palming parties is we want to feel what's happening while we're palming and doing those extended sessions, so that when we come out and we blink open, we don't just go back to old bad vision habits of staring and straining and trying really hard to see things. We're going into the palming to kind of eliminate the attempt to try to see and just feel what it feels like for these new habits to be bouncing around in there, like the shifting and the blinking. And then maybe those start to translate into when you come out and your eyes open back up. So I would love to hear your experience, whether there was any particular kind of movement-based things that showed up for you, anything different than the few little suggestions that I made, or if you do have any kind of questions or want to check in about anything regarding natural vision improvement, I'm happy to take a look at the chat and see what's on your mind, because I love just hearing from people who are experimenting with this and implementing it into their day-to-day experience. Oh, and real quick, the palming we just did, since it's this kind of longer palming session, it might not exactly be what you do every single day in terms of your daily routine of taking 15, 20, 30 minutes out at a time to do the palming. Maybe you do that every so often. But in terms of kind of this more daily ritual and practice, I really like it when people just take these short little palming breaks where maybe it's just for 30 seconds to a minute, or maybe even less. Maybe it's just one or two big breaths to kind of help you settle and relax. So I want this stuff to be really versatile too, and not necessarily this thing that feels like, oh, I just have to do this practice for X amount of time in order to have it work. It's really, how does this fit into my day and into my life without it feeling so much like an exercise? So yeah, let's check in here and see what's going on from the live chat. So once again, you're welcome to type into the chat and I will take a look at it as it comes in. And we got greetings from Italy. Hello, hello, ciao. I bought your book. It's amazing. Awesome. One question. I have some little problems in the near vision. What's your experience for presbyopia? Like best tips for that? Have a nice day. Thank you. So yeah, the presbyopia or the farsightedness is generally something that we want to be looking at in terms of things that are going to, first of all, relax the whole system and the eye muscles in particular, but then what's going to maybe stimulate some more accommodation, which is the eye's ability to focus up at that near point for the near vision. So it's almost this kind of like twofold approach where we think of that farsightedness where we have difficulty reading up close as sort of a state of under accommodation, like the eye is not accommodating when you look up at that near distance. And so the initial inclination might be just, well, what gets my eyes to accommodate? What's going to stimulate that? But if we just jump there and we maybe kind of skip the relaxation step, it might not actually work as well. So that's why I always invite the people that I work with presbyopia and hyperopia, the kind of two different types of farsightedness, to still really focus in on the relaxation. And to be specific, maybe you're intentionally envisioning the recti muscles relaxing of the eye. So if you're familiar with the eye anatomy, the 6 muscles around the eye, which if you got the book, then it's right there in the book with the diagrams and everything explaining it. But with farsightedness, we do look more at those recti muscles, the ones that attach on the top, bottom, left, and right of each eye and just go straight back behind the eye. So those generally are the ones that are kind of more engaged or almost kind of pulling on the eye to influence the axial length of it. So making it either longer for near focus or flatter for far focus. So that farsightedness is almost thought of as like an eye that's stuck in that far focus axial length, partly because those recti muscles are kind of keeping it there. They're maybe the ones that are sort of straining and almost the culprits for having that difficulty reading near or focusing up close, because the eye isn't finding as many opportunities to get into that other shape required for the near focus, which is generally brought on by the other 2 muscles, the oblique muscles that wrap around the middle of the eye, sort of like a belt. So it's almost like they can't, pull against the recti muscles that are sort of stuck in a way. So then, we look at the nearsightedness as sort of the opposite of that, where we just kind of reverse the roles here, and we look at the oblique muscles role in keeping the nearsighted eye more sort of stuck in that longer axial length. And then it's like the recti muscles can't, change the shape of the eye to that flatter one. So the nearsighted eye is like a state of over accommodation, meaning it's sort of stuck in that near focusing position. So with myopia, you can see near, but then the eye isn't releasing that near focus and going into the flatter shape. It's staying long, even when looking far away. So that's why whether we're nearsighted or farsighted, it really is super important to still be primarily starting with this relaxation foundation to just first of all relax those recti muscles and the oblique muscles in both of these cases. And remember, there's also astigmatism that throws another wrench in this of this combination of recti and oblique muscle tension that might not be quite as clean cut as the nearsightedness and farsightedness. So either way, all these refractive errors are connected to that strain in the muscles in certain ways. So really looking at different ways that's going to physically relax the eyes, like we've already done today with the palming. Such a big part of that is to relax the eye muscles. And maybe in your case in particular, you're thinking about relaxing those recti muscles and feeling what it feels like even while palming, to just envision those muscles relaxing and maybe even envision the shape of the eye changing. Because it's not like we can control that consciously or intentionally. But remember what we were doing while palming, it was also kind of exploring that unconscious or unintentional side of it. So it's neat to kind of play with that relationship and that eye-mind connection. So yeah, maybe all these relaxation practices that you start with, you're really targeting those recti muscles. And then as you then go into the further stages of the vision training, like the fusion and the vision building and the reading and things like that, then you've got that relaxation foundation with you. And then you're experimenting with all these ways that are going to stimulate the accommodation response in a more relaxed way, as opposed to feeling like you have to strain to make your eyes accommodate, because we want to figure out the more autofocus mode. So good question there. And I think it also served the purpose of kind of addressing the myopia a little bit too. So yeah, once again, this whole approach here, the Bates method, oftentimes was referred to as eye education as opposed to eye exercises. So really a big part of it are these kinds of questions that pop into your mind to help you just kind of understand these concepts, including the anatomy and physiology of the eye. So glad you're thinking about that. So let's see what else we got here. All right, so I've seen a question about if I have opinion about curved monitors, like computer monitors that are curved instead of flat. You got one that's 32 inches, 2K resolution versus the panel. I'm experiencing more relief than a classic flat panel. Interesting. I don't have a ton of experience with them. I think I've used maybe one over the past decade or so. I thought it was kind of interesting. I don't know if I've had enough experience with it to have a true opinion on it, but it seems like it maybe is helping you out and benefiting you. So that's generally what our kind of gauge point is this causing strain, or is this contributing to relaxation? It's kind of an oversimplified way to look at things, but sometimes it is helpful to just have those two basic kind of categories there. And it really helps you figure out like what's best for your eyes. So yeah, maybe I'll get a chance to try one out a little bit more and have a little bit more experience with that. But it looks like you have a second question too, because you also use orange glasses for night tasks on the computer without prescription, only orange color. I feel no strain after long periods on the monitor. It's important to limit blue light at night. Yes, I would say everybody has, once again, like I was hinting at, this individuality and uniqueness in this whole process. Is everybody has a different kind of response to artificial light, natural light, different colors, and at different times. So on the whole, I do agree with you that, being aware of the blue light exposure at night and doing what you can to limit it is probably going to help, and not only help with that eye strain, like you mentioned, and enable you to actually, interact with the screens for more. But it's also good to just, limit it in general, especially if we're talking about nighttime, just taking into account the circadian rhythms and the, melatonin and different things like that. So it's a combination of like the blue light, but also like these other factors like our sleep cycles and sleep quality. There's been a lot of questions in one of our groups about, eye strain during sleep, and just looking at different strategies to bring the relaxation into not only your waking hours, but also when you sleep at night. So yeah, if you enjoy those blue blocking glasses, I would say go for it. And yeah, everybody has the opportunity to experiment with those, either the just kind of basic ones, or there's lots of different companies out there that make them. I find over the years, after experimenting with lots of them, I've really just kind of continued to settle back on using blue blocking softwares on my computer, like Iris or Flux or the night shift mode. So I find that just a little simpler, and just decreasing the amount of blue light that's coming out in the first place seems to accomplish a very similar thing that you expressed, where my eyes don't really feel the same kind of strain compared to when it's that full blue light brightness, which I do have on in the daytime, right? When the sun is out and there's blue light out the window, then I also have it on my screen. But definitely, like you said, once the sun goes down, I'm turning that bar down to decrease the amount of blue light. All right, seeing a few more comments coming into the chat here. So awesome. We got happy palming time, Nathan. Nice. I spend much time in palming when my eyes are tired. It's the same practice if we're in a dark room. How much important is the imagination to improve the eyesight? So yeah, kind of these two questions of sort of the physical environment and the physical aspect of palming, but then also the mental aspect of it, of the imagination. So yeah, I like to remind people that before Dr. Bates even introduced palming in his original works, he generally would just invite people to close their eyes. So just closing the eyelids, and that right there, super simple. It's already a little bit darker than when your eyes are open. It's kind of obvious, but when the eyes are open, there's light coming in and stimulating the retinas. The eyes are closed. You've got that filter of the eyelid. The eyelids still let light penetrate through. So it's pretty thin skin. So it is darker than if the eyes are open, but it's not totally dark. But some people find that just with the eyelids down, eyes closed, they're more relaxed. They feel some rest happen, whether it's physical, mental, emotional, whatever. That's the point of all these practices, right? Is relaxation. So the first thing to try is just to close the eyes. Very, very simple. And then Bates said, if that doesn't achieve relaxation, maybe you put your palms over your eyes and you block even more light, because your hands are much thicker than your eyelids are. So now they're going to block all that light and create much more of that dark environment, where a lot of people do find that, yes, this is easier for me to relax and rest in, because there's no light stimulating the retinas and the optic nerves to kind of, draw your attention and your energy out. It's more of this kind of rest and relaxation and recharging almost. So it doesn't have to be with the palms on the face, though. You could also just be in a dark room, like you said, and either have your eyes open or closed. Or like I said, I took these people on this night vision walk. We were out in the dark with our eyes open. And every once in a while we would palm or close the eyes to kind of, once again, stay in that more dark adapted night vision mode. So yeah, some people will wear blindfolds or eye masks or cover their eyes with different sorts of things to achieve that darkness. Doesn't really matter. I mean, in general, the palming, the reason why I keep doing these palming parties, this is the 20th one, which means I've been doing it for 5 years every quarter, because the palming is this kind of extra layer that you might not get from these other things, just with the whole thing about the skin to skin contact and this almost kind of like self-healing layer of it, whether we're even like envisioning sending healing or energy or light through the hands into the eyes, or just because it helps you relax into that next layer because of the darkness. But like I also remind people, and I mentioned it during the visualization, is that, you get to this point where you don't even really need to palm so much, because you're able to get that relaxation not only just when you have your eyes closed and you're able to feel it, but it even happens when the eyes are open. And that's kind of what we're going for here. It's like, we don't want to just feel the relaxation when we do this and cover up the eyes with the hands. We want to feel that relaxation all the time. So that, to me, is the habit that we are learning and extracting from the practice. The practice is the palming, but the habit is what we get from it. This ability to relax the eyes while they're moving and blinking and while they're open. So yeah, keep on practicing with it, whether it's in a dark room, if that makes it feel easier for you to kind of tune into the movement, or maybe you do go out on a night vision walk yourself and try that out. Awesome. Moving on from Sheila Rose Indigo. I'm glad I caught the end. Your suggestions to visualize the movement in nature was really helpful for me and really relaxed my eyes. Nice. I'm going to incorporate more palming into my practice. That's awesome. Yeah. I mentioned to people that I made the mistake of kind of not moving my eyes while palming for quite a while, like if not a year or two into my practice of learning the Bates method, because I knew the visualization was important. And that kind of brings me back to the second part of the last question, like, how important is the imagination in vision improvement? I knew it was important, but I didn't really understand how it was connected to the physical eyesight until I really filled out this whole palming visualization eye-mind connection of, when I imagine that thing in nature moving, that squirrel running up the tree, it's getting my eyes to physically move as if it were watching it. And so I just remember, my vision teacher inviting me to pretend that I could see through my closed eyelids. which I did with just my eyes closed at first. But then it's like, well, what if I could pretend that I can see through my palms? And, I've got this window right next to me with a view of the river and trees and buildings. So I can just turn over to the window and imagine and remember the river and the trees and the buildings and the clouds. And now I'm back onto the screen and I'm picturing the camera and the keyboard and my water bottle. And so it's this way of actually activating the vision from within without physically seeing it. Once again, kind of like that practice ground. So it's highly important, and it might not always make sense right away. And that's why it's good to keep coming back to the practice and coming back to the palming party so that you have all these different experiences with it, so that once again, you eventually get to this point where it's like, oh, I don't need the palming party because my eyes and my mind are maintaining this thing that I've learned from doing the palming practice, or maybe a different practice, right? The palming is just one practice of the Bates method. So for you, it might be something totally different. And that's also good to remember. All right. So we got someone coming in from Germany. Derny, welcome. Yeah. Could you explain what's to look at diamond text or smaller print? How to look at very, very small fonts, but I can't see well those fonts. What do I need to do with this small chart? So great question, because ties back to that one, the original one about presbyopia and farsightedness, this kind of difficulty of reading fine print up close. Got a couple examples here from this little book here. Got this little, this is normal size text, and then this is a reprint of Dr. Bates's 7 Truths of Normal Sight, and then another little reading card on the side here with the text that starts normal, and then it gets smaller, 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 smaller. And even just like these various kinds of charts with the small letters, but even just things around the house that you have, like, ingredients, labels, and supplement bottles and things like that. And sometimes a lot of mail you get in the mail has, fine print on it that you can use. And there's just been this myth out there that fine print is bad for the eyes. But Dr. Bates, interestingly, kind of investigated that myth and actually found quite the opposite to be the case, where actually the eyes tended to not only relax when looking at the fine print, but it's eventually people found it even easier to read than the bigger print was. It's kind of counterintuitive because a lot of times we do associate the larger size text with kind of easier to see. So it really does come back to relaxation yet again. Not to sound like a broken record, but we think of a lot of times reading as, like you said, it's not easy to read or to see at first. So a lot of times we'll make an effort, we'll strain, or maybe add some physical tension or strain. And that might be this kind of attempt to try and force the eyes to accommodate on that little fine print. But the other option is to see if we can actually kind of relax while we look at it. So we might, implement some of the things that we were practicing while palming, or while doing some swinging, or just those visualizations we were playing with. And meanwhile, the fine print is just there to kind of gaze at without wearing glasses. And it might be blurry or out of focus at first, but you're just kind of moving around and blinking and shifting and breathing, and kind of being more of that observer to see what happens to the fine print, whether it's diamond type or micro print or whatever size you're working with, and what makes it kind of worse and what makes it a little better and what makes it stay the same. And a lot of eyes closed, because once again, we don't want to fall into that trap of trying or efforting. But that's generally how people start cultivating these clear flashes and have these moments where either that really fine print starts to clear up, or maybe you look at a normal size text on a book or a screen or something, and it appears sharper and clearer, and it seems almost kind of bigger than normal, even though it's normal. So that's sometimes what people describe as they're improving their near vision and getting back down to reading the smaller sizes. It's almost this kind of like zooming in effect, or almost this 3D effect. So interesting to play with, and I would encourage you to just keep using it and gazing at it in a relaxed way. Like that's essentially how Dr. Bates would invite a lot of the people to work with it, was just to kind of move it side to side in front of you and in and out and close and remember it. Coming back to that previous question about the imagination, practicing imagining the fine print up close in a clear way, in a relaxed way. So everybody has their own different ways of doing that, but it makes me happy to hear that you're looking into actually challenging that old vision myth and learning how to use small size text correctly to stimulate that relaxation and accommodation. All right, so let's see. Also, somebody's talking about training in Muay Thai and also stretching being very important for flexibility. After doing a bit of yoga, I noticed my eyes feel much more loose and there's less stiffness when looking at things. So I love that. Yeah, because it's really thinking about, to me, that's that dynamic relaxation, whether we're talking about yoga, stretching, Muay Thai, any kind of exercise, sport, application of using the body in that way. It's that dynamic relaxation that we're looking for. Today with the palming, it's a little bit more on the passive spectrum of where we did, do some movement today with the swaying and the swinging and the rocking and stuff, and eye movements and noticing the inner movements of the body. So that might be more than we normally do. Sometimes we're just kind of sitting more still and we don't feel like it's very dynamic relaxation. So those types of things are really good opportunities to be, accessing your vision practice in real activities like that and noticing the positive effect they have on the range of motion, that circulation piece that was brought up earlier of getting the blood flow and the lymph flow. So yeah, if you are able to do these things without glasses, then that gives you a great opportunity to notice those fluctuations as your vision improves and sharpens up and then maybe drops and dips down and gets a little blurrier. But maybe that's why you just do it in practice as opposed to like in competition or something like that. So there's varying levels of practicing it. But thank you for sharing that, because I also noticed the same thing where some of my very first improvements in my vision were from after going through a whole yoga class with my glasses off. And just the breathing, the relaxation, the stretching, like you said, the eyes open and closed, and the rest, it really just helped my eyes and my brain adjust. So yeah, encourage people to find their way of giving themselves opportunity to spend an hour or two without their glasses, doing something relaxing and stimulating. All right, question coming in. Hi, Nathan. Do you think that poor eyesight after 40 is caused by low sunlight and daylight exposure? What light do you suggest when the weather's cloudy? I do use red light lamps to mimic the sunlight. Cool. So you've already got that going for you. So yeah, I think that's a good option, is to maybe incorporate some red light in there, red light therapy even, to kind of supplement some of the natural light that we get from the sun. Ideally, we're doing our sunning practices as much as we can and alternating the sunning, the palming. I'm always having people do the sun sandwiches of alternating between what we did today in the palming party and then actually facing the sun with the eyes closed and moving side to side, or doing one at a time. So you palm your right eye, sun your left eye for a few seconds, switching back, palming the left eye, sunning the right eye for a few seconds, just for however long feels comfortable before you either go into palming both eyes or turn around or end the experience. But yeah, that can be a very, very stimulating thing. And that's the ideal, is you getting it outside in the sunlight. But like you hinted at, maybe that you're not able to get the sun, or we are moving into the fall and the winter here. So it's going to be darker and darker and less ideal conditions for the outdoor versions. So if possible, in addition to the red lights that you've got, maybe also look into, adjusting your indoor lighting, maybe using some more incandescent or halogen light bulbs as opposed to LEDs. Sometimes people find them to be a little colder, so to speak, and maybe not as kind of comfortable for the eyes in the long term. So yeah, I like it when people do look into these types of things. And like, I've got my color changing light behind me, which I love in the wintertime when it's dark and I'm not getting as much of those natural colors, because it's dark around 4:30 here in Vermont in the winter. And I actually just interviewed someone on my podcast about red light therapy that's going to be coming out probably next month. So there'll be even more about that topic in particular, something I've been wanting to share with people for quite a while. So I'll make sure I get that out for you. Awesome. looking through some more questions here. I'm just restarting vision improvement from Sheila Rose Indigo again. The right way after trying too hard before and no improvement. For now, I've gone back to my full prescription and astigmatism, practicing habits of good vision and relaxing. Yeah, so you're bringing up a couple good points, especially like the role of the glasses in this process, and being okay with using the glasses as these tools that are helping us relax. So obviously we're spending time with the naked eye and we're doing these vision practices without glasses and stuff, but if and when we need to see something clearly, we use the glasses and we keep those good vision habits going even when the glasses are on. Because that was another mistake I made, not just staring while palming, like I said earlier, but when I would have to put my glasses back on to drive or to work on the computer, or just if I wanted to, a lot of times I'd be guilty of not doing my good vision habits anymore. I would stop blinking. My eyes would go back into staring. I generally was kind of tuning out my periphery. So once I started learning that lesson of, the good vision habits aren't just for when I have no glasses on. It's really meant to be 24/7. So then that really changed things. So, using those glasses is fine, just making sure that they're not causing strain. We're doing whatever we can to, once again, identify what's causing the strain and then see what we can do to kind of bring some more relaxation into that. But I love hearing that you are practicing the habits and relaxing, because those are the two really foundational pieces that we've talked a lot about today. The relaxation physically of the eyes, but also the relaxed habits of not only what your eyes are doing, but also the more mental habits too. Like we played with the imagination of movement, the memory of movement. These are these more kind of mental habits that eventually do show up more in our day-to-day. So glad to hear you're coming back into it and letting go of that old way of trying too hard, because I know I did plenty of that when I was trying to figure all this stuff out myself, because I just wanted it so bad. So in other things in my life, generally, if I just tried much harder, I would accomplish that goal. But the vision improvement proved to be quite different than that. And it was so much more about relaxing into it and inviting these habits in, and being patient with it and allowing myself to use the glasses when I needed them without beating myself up about it. So you're asking what I would suggest that you do next. I would not only continue what you are doing, but on the glasses piece, you could look at, in addition to the full strength glasses, maybe I do have an alternative pair to use from time to time. So maybe it's one with no astigmatism, or maybe you decrease the strength of the sphere for the prescription for the near or farsightedness. And then you've got this second pair that you can kind of play with and start adapting and adjusting in that direction, but still having the full strength for when you need them. Or maybe sometimes people like using the pinhole glasses or things like that to kind of complement, the naked eye time, and to have an alternative other than just the full strength glasses. And I would say just one of the main, vision habits for you to be paying attention to is this combination of the central fixation and the peripheral awareness, because that's really what brings the clarity back in a lot of cases, is getting the central fixation habit as the new way of seeing things pretty much all the time, and letting go of the old way of seeing things, which is diffusing, where we spread out and we stare and we try and see large areas all at once, instead of learning how to shift around on smaller and smaller little parts of the picture to allow the visual cortex and the brain to then piece the picture together for us through all these movements. So that's another kind of aspect of what we were doing today in the palming party, is movement leads to more and more of that central fixation habit, and therefore more clarity without the glasses. So definitely, if that hasn't been on your radar, look a little bit more into that, the central fixation, and having the peripheral awareness as a part of it. Awesome. I'm seeing from Crystal Evolution. Hi, Nathan. This is my first live palming party. Woo, glad you could make it today. I began doing palming about 2 months ago and haven't yet found a way to completely cover my eyes with my smallish palms. Could I use an eye mask? Yeah, like I mentioned a little bit earlier, you can totally use other things to cover the eyes, but I also wouldn't be too concerned about getting that complete coverage. It's so much more about just kind of, having, once again, that skin to skin contact. Even if there's a little light leaking through, that's totally fine. really just kind of relax into that sensation of like, wow, this feels really good to just rest my hands over my eyes just for a few moments or even a few minutes if you've got more time for it. But certainly using an eye mask is an alternative option. You might not get the 100% full benefit that you might get through the palming, but you can still get a lot of that good rest and relaxation by just kind of covering the eyes with something else. Also, another question about lighting during gaming sessions on my computer in the evening. A warm lamp or something else. I don't want to play in a dark room. I'm glad you don't want to do that, because that's kind of the worst situation, is to just have the screen be the only light source in the room. So yeah, what kind of ambient light can you get in the room? That's not going to kind of, cut out the screen light. So generally, the rule that I try to follow is to kind of have the ambient light either match the brightness of the screen, or it's less than the brightness of the screen. So like I've got my color changing light here. I've got a little flickering light here. I use these dimmable lights and incandescent lights. And like at home, for example, I have these Himalayan salt lamps that provide a nice kind of low dim glow for that more kind of ambient lighting, or even just a candle. Light a couple candles that can kind of set the mood and give you not only that soft light around, but the flickering flame and how the light moves based off of the candle. It actually is going to create a little bit more of that kind of peripheral stimulation through movement and noticing things around the screen. Because that's the other thing we want to watch out for during gaming and any kind of screen time is tunnel vision, where we actually just ignore the periphery. And that's generally what happens when we don't have ambient lighting around the screen. If the screen is the only light source in the room, we're just going to tunnel in on it. But guess what? Even if you do have ambient light on around your screen, it's still possible to tunnel vision on it. And it's very habitual. So we have to kind of learn how to break that habit. And that's why I have like the flickering light or the color changing light, because the change in the background is preventing my eyes and my mind from just kind of getting sucked into the screen and not noticing the rest of the room or what's out the window, which is why, I always have my screens next to windows. That might not be as important if you're doing the gaming sessions at night when you might not be able to see as much out the window, but maybe there's, cars driving by or things like that. But just thinking about what I can do to get some ambient light in the background, and like bonus points if you can get like movement in the background as well. And another kind of similar question, if I recommend Kindle for reading. Yeah, some of the Kindles also offer that kind of blue blocking or that blue light decrease mode as well, which you might want to look into if you're doing the reading at night. But yeah, in general, those kind of e-ink readers sometimes are better on the eyes than like a LED display or a screen, backlit screen. But in general, I think overall the eyes just prefer print materials that's, backlit, not backlit, but, a light coming over your shoulder or just ambient in the room. So that's maybe ideal, but the Kindles definitely make it very convenient. So I think it's a fine alternative. Once again, as long as you're not tunneling in on it, what can you do to make sure you're maintaining some awareness of what's happening around the Kindle too. Nice. Another comment on the dynamic relaxation, saying after playing basketball, the swinging practice becomes nice and fluid. That's nice. Yeah. Any kind of sport, I think, is going to kind of not only benefit your vision practice and get your swinging nice and fluid, but then realizing how much that, basketball becomes your swinging, noticing the oppositional movement as you go up and down the court, following the ball, noticing the movement of the opponents and the players. So yeah, definitely. I was just playing some basketball earlier this weekend, so I love it. All right. Oh yeah. And you're also bringing up that classic story of someone who palmed for 20 hours and healed his eyesight. That was from Dr. Bates's original work, Perfect Sight Without Glasses. So like I said, these palming parties I do, they're not 20 hours long. We palm for maybe 20 minutes, but it is this invitation to like go longer. You don't have to stop when I prompt to stop. You can palm the whole time. We're at just over an hour right now. So doing an hour of palming can be really, really relaxing for some people, not for all people. So we got to feel it out and see, like, I've never palmed my eyes for 20 hours. And I've still been able to improve my vision. So we don't get too stuck on these things, but it is this cool story, right? It's like, pretty neat that without even having to do any other kind of vision training things, just by palming and relaxing, you are able to get improved vision. So I think it's a good parable in a sense to kind of, what's the lesson to learn from this? Maybe it's not take it literally and I have to palm my eyes for hours and hours, but it's just like, oh, palming can lead to these improvements. Maybe I can get that relaxed in 20 minutes instead of 20 hours. I'm all about saving time and being efficient. Morning palm from Malaysia. Welcome. That's awesome. Yeah, normally this one's a little bit later than normal. Normally I'm doing it at 12 o'clock my time, Eastern US time, which might be kind of more the middle of the night for you over there. So we had a class going on today at 12. And so I wanted to try it a little bit later in the afternoon, and glad we're able to catch some new folks. And yeah, a little suggestion here that the mainstream doesn't like Bates because his method makes eye science so easy that everyone can practice and get benefits from it. Yeah, it's definitely a more kind of self-healing kind of approach as opposed to what we might be more used to in the conventional model of kind of being prescribed and dispense these glasses and contacts and these treatments coming from the outside that, they do provide better eyesight, but it's not truly like healing the underlying issues. And oftentimes it can either make the original issue worse or even lead to other complications down the line. So yeah, anytime there's going to be a little bit more of a sort of self-empowerment based kind of thing, it is a combination of like either not getting picked up by the mainstream, but also it's not for everyone. We got to remember that there's always going to be people who are not interested in this path and they just want to get on with wearing glasses and contacts for the rest of their life. And that's totally fine. Everybody gets to make their choice. And it's just a matter of knowing that this choice is available and that like you said, it's available to everyone. These practices are quite simple, like you also said. And so, yeah, I can also see what you're saying and what you're coming from there of why maybe even though this has been around for 100 years now, there's maybe 30 people in the live palming party instead of 3,000, right? So it's like there's still have a lot of work to go to keep getting this out there and helping more and more people understand how simple and easy it is and how you can just start right away. And all we're doing is we're relaxing and getting these new habits under our belts. So appreciate your contribution there. And yeah, I like it when everybody starts to kind of question these things and like, well, why don't more people know about this? And it always amazes me that so many people feel kind of called and inclined to share this with people and let their friends and family know about it. I mean, that's how it all started with me. That's why I'm here today is I just couldn't keep it to myself. I just wanted to talk about it with more people. Hey, Haley, welcome. Can you hike and palm at the same time on a busy trip? Still very visualizing and relaxing. Well, it depends on where you're hiking. You might want to be careful where you're walking. But I do like experimenting with maybe not necessarily, you can always take palming breaks, right? And I think it could be a really cool way to kind of rest and recharge if you are on a hike or something like that, or a bike ride. Because a lot of times we'll accidentally start to strain our eyes while we're exerting our body. If we're exercising, hiking, doing the Muay Thai, like was said earlier, the basketball, it might be good to start getting a rhythm going of either just closing your eyes or palming for a moment and checking in. Am I straining my eyes? Could I do this activity with less strain? So that's a great way to kind of break the activity up and make sure you're sort of addressing it before it piles up too much. And then we'd like get a headache or some other symptom. But I do also have some fun playing around with walking with my eyes closed. So I'm not necessarily palming, but like I was demonstrating earlier, pretending I can see through my hands, but I do it through my eyelids. And I generally only do this on, wide open places and not things where I could kind of trip and hurt myself. But it's kind of fun to gauge, my memory of the scene and my depth perception, because so much of our natural vision improvement isn't just about clearing things up, but it's about getting more stereoscopic and 3D vision in our world. And so I would kind of say, okay, that tree is up there about 50 feet away. I'm going to close my eyes and open my eyes when I think it's right next to me. and see how close I can gauge to opening my eyes right at the 50-foot mark. And sometimes I open up pretty close to it. Other times I open past it. More often than not, I'm opening it before it because I get kind of scared that I'm not going straight anymore or something like that. So yeah, you can have fun with it. And that's what it's all about. It's about relaxing and having fun with it and not taking these exercises too seriously. Got a question here about the keto diet. Is keto diet bad for clear vision? I lowered my carbs intake, but my vision seems blurry. I'm not a dietitian, so I can't exactly speak to this in particular, but I like I've said a couple times today in one way or another, how unique and individual we are. So I really, for myself personally, I've never sort of ascribed to just one, mass marketed diet, because that's not necessarily for me and my body. So I can kind of learn from it and kind of try it out here and there. But that's just always been my philosophy of listening to my body and noticing either how certain kind of symptoms or things are coming up in relation to what I'm intaking or not. And then kind of tweaking it from there. And then certainly you can always, consult a professional or a dietitian to get that more sort of customized approach, no matter what that looks like for you. But yeah, fascinating topic to me, this connection between diet and vision. So glad that you're looking into it and staying sensitive to the feedback. It's tricky though, because sometimes let's say if you're kind of detoxing or something like that, it can kind of make your vision worse as it's kind of making its way out, so to speak. So it's good to be aware of these kind of different types of things. Like, is this something that's actually making my vision worse, or is this actually in the long run good for me? It's just, I'm kind of like getting something out of me and it's temporarily affecting my vision in a certain way. Happy solstice, Haley. Yep, just a couple more here before I wrap up, since we're a little past the hour here. But just seeing some cool comments and questions coming in. So once again, thank you everybody for coming. Once again, I always do these on the quarterly sessions. So the next one will be the winter solstice in December. So mark your calendars for that. But you don't have to wait till then, because remember, like I mentioned at the beginning, there's all these class series happening over the next several weeks. So you can check that out in the link as well, in case you want to actually enroll in one of these courses or classes. So I'm seeing Pedro coming in here. Try and practice looking around details while walking, but still I always tend up forcing when looking far. Looking closer seems easier to relax. It's hard to do the central fixation on blur and still relax. So in this case, we start applying central fixation not on the physical blur, but on the mental clarity. Because if you're on your walk and your eyes are open, you're looking in the distance and it's blurry out there, that's the physical blur. But the Bates method is getting us back in touch with our internal clarity. So what we did while we're palming today, envisioning the leaves falling from the trees, the birds flying, we are centralizing, in our mind, right? We're thinking about these individual parts of these clear mental pictures. So that's what you do on your walk with your eyes open. You're not getting bothered by the physical blur out there. You're keeping your mind focused on the clear version in your mind, right? So that's what the eye-mind connection play is all about, is really, having that connection with the mental clarity, even when you're looking at something that's blurry. So if you're, looking in the distance and it's blurry, or like some of the other questions today about looking at fine print up close and it's blurry, don't get so focused on that physical blur there. Keep the mind focused on the mental clarity, which then enables what you're looking at to appear clearer. So it's this really interesting, mental way to work with it, instead of getting kind of stuck in a sense on the physical blur. It's like this constant temptation to want to just kind of stay on that physical picture. And like you said, try and force the physical clarity. We're just totally bypassing that and saying, nope, I'm going to keep my mind focused on the mental picture, the mental clarity. When I do that successfully, then the physical picture appears clear. So it's not coming from this physical force. It's coming from the thought. It's coming from the memory, the imagination. So once again, that question, is the imagination important for natural vision? Yes, we're using it on our walks. And if you can't do it on your walk at first, do it while you palm. That's why we palm. It's, once again, the little practice area for that. So yeah, keep playing with that and keep us in the loop with how it's feeling. Seeing below that, hello, Nathan. I have a big problem in my house because upstairs neighbors are very noisy. Stomping on the floor causes me issues, and I notice my eyesight is worse. Mindfulness and headphones. Yeah, it's we talk a lot about our peripheral vision. Things that we see around our periphery, not just the central area, and that exists also with your auditory sense. If you're hearing these peripheral sounds that are out of your control, or sensing this peripheral energy that's disruptive to you. So yeah, I'm sorry you're going through that, but maybe there's some way to either communicate and let them know that, hey, I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but this can be kind of disruptful sometimes. And I wonder if there's a way that we could find a way to avoid this. And all these situations also give us good opportunities to learn about ourselves and our adaptations and reactions to things too. So it sounds like you're exploring some alternatives there. But yeah, hopefully it's kind of a good example of how we can maybe even practice tapping into relaxation in these more kind of chaotic environments or stressful kind of situations. Even just this morning, I was in this kind of loud, busy cafe and everybody was talking over each other. And it was interesting to feel that it could either kind of pull me into that, disrupted state where my nervous system gets kind of nervous and stressed and tense, and probably my eyes would strain and my vision might even get worse. Or I could find some other way to kind of relax into that kind of chaotic environment. And then it doesn't necessarily have those same kind of stress responses. So yeah, there's sort of the inner work that we get to do with it, but then also you're bringing up a good point of, the role of the environment around us and how even Dr. Bates said himself in those 7 truths of normal sight that normal sight can only be produced under favorable conditions. So you're experiencing it yourself under these unfavorable conditions. Normal eyesight feels less attainable and the eyesight feels worse. So, we're looking at both how can we get these good external conditions for normal sight, but also what about the internal conditions of how we're feeling within. And yeah, maybe you get some earplugs too. Awesome. People saying thank you for answering the questions, and also mentioning that she's using a clear 250 watt chicken brooder lamp for red light therapy all winter. I live in the North USA. I actually just bought a couple of those last month at a thrift store, because a lot of times thrift stores will have these like really cheap used light bulbs or incandescent bulbs that they don't sell it. It's like overstock. They don't sell them at all the stores anymore. So yeah, I'll be using mine as well this winter here in Vermont. Nice. Also asking about during sleep, if that time spent in bed could be similar to palming. It can be, but like I was sharing with some of the community earlier this week about how Dr. Bates even studied the effect of eye strain during sleep. So sometimes just because we're sleeping doesn't necessarily mean we're getting the rest and the relaxation. When we do an intentional relaxation practice like palming and swinging and sunning, it's a little bit more direct and kind of guaranteed that we will get that relaxation response. A lot of people actually strain their eyes when they sleep and maybe even wake up with uncomfortable eyes. You would think that, I just rested all night. Why aren't they recharged? But there might have been some strain going on. So we cover that in the Better Eyesight podcast. If you want to learn more about that, you can search for sleep in the episode archive. All right, last couple ones, and we're going to sign off for the day. Does spine alignment have a lot to do with clear sight and relaxation? Have you ever been to a chiropractor yourself? Josiah from Colorado. I have. It's been a little while, but yeah, definitely when I lived in Asheville, North Carolina, which is where I started my vision practice, I was not only going to see chiropractors and also doing some like work trades with them, but I even ended up working for a network chiropractor. So that was really interesting to learn about, as well as the relationship between the nervous system and the eyes being such a big part of that. And so, yeah, I think in certain situations, it can potentially play a role. And just in general, this whole posture topic and spinal alignment. And, I think it's really important to look at because the eyes are essentially extensions of your brain and such a big part of your nervous system, the optic nerves. So if there's any kind of misalignment, either in the spine or in the posture or in slouching, which I used to do a ton of, especially since, when I would used to do gaming long into the hours of the night and just kind of slouch on my couch. So that's another thing about that previous question, is not just thinking about the external lighting and things like that, but how are you sitting while playing? And can we kind of find that ergonomic kind of position? Because we can bring these, alignment things into our activities, and hopefully it'll help them feel better and help you perform better in the moment. So yeah, whether it's something that you kind of do through the stretching and the yoga, like we talked about earlier, or you do go maybe see a professional or a chiropractor or someone specializing in that type of work. I had some interesting experiences where my eyesight would clear, seemingly in direct correlation with getting an adjustment from either a network chiropractor or a traditional chiropractor or a cervical spine specialist. So yeah, I'm always into experimenting these complementary approaches to see what might help. Because yeah, a lot of times the atlas and the axis, the top two vertebrae on the spine, are generally associated with the eyes and the function of vision. And turns out maybe a lot of people can have that area be a little compromised through poor posture. Hello from Atlantic Canada. What's the best eye movement when you are trying to heal vertical astigmatism? Thanks for all you do to help our eye health. That's awesome. And then Pedro, last thing there, is this magic with a laughy face? A lot of times I'm asking myself that question too, because of how not only powerful it can be, but like someone said earlier, how simple it can be. And how we really, more we embrace that mental side of it, like we talked about earlier, it almost kind of feels not only more and more easy, but more and more kind of magical, because we're using our imagination more and more, and our creativity and all these things within start kind of activating. But coming back to that astigmatism question from Linda, we're just kind of thinking about checking in with ourselves and how the different directions feel when we do either eye movements or head movements or body movements. So I like it when people explore and the mental movements. So like exploring, the horizontal eye movements, the vertical eye movements, maybe the diagonals or the circulars or the kind of more curved shapes. Same thing with the head, moving the head side to side, up and down, doing these different directions. Maybe same thing with getting more of the body involved, with the swings and things like that, and really noticing where are the eyes moving easily, where do they get a little caught up, and notice a little bit of tension or strain or difficulty there, including the convergences, like we talked about earlier with improving the near vision. Are we able to converge and look down towards the nose? Are we able to converge and look up towards the center of the forehead? Are we able to converge towards the center and get the eyes to cross in the middle? And that's sort of another level of these eye movements that can help kind of unwind things like the astigmatism and the myopia and the presbyopia and hyperopia. So, really being exploratory with it, but then also those mental movements. So whether your eyes are closed or palming, thinking about the movement like we did today, thinking about horizontal movement, thinking about vertical movement, doing these different directions, and taking note there too, because that can be really important, and you can learn a lot there as well. So I think that is going to do it for our Q&A and our questions. I always love going through our chat and seeing what's on your mind, whether it has to do with what we brought into the palming party in the first part, or just the things that you are encountering on your vision improvement explorations. So yeah, speaking of the explorations, in addition to these quarterly palming parties, I also do these monthly open forums, which are free and available to attend and check out the replays. So that's linked through my website as well. You can sign up for that. Or if you do feel like kind of stepping up and actually being part of either my Fixing Farsightedness class or my Nixing Nearsightedness class coming up in September, October, November, then you can go to integraleyesight.com/series. And you'll also see information there about my team members' classes going on as well, the Practicing What Matters and integrating our vision with soul wisdom. So a lot of cool things coming up, a lot of new offerings and new aspects that we get to share with you, and all the old classics too, like these palming parties. So like I said, I'll be hopping back on here for the winter solstice. So bring your sweater and your cozy clothes for that one. We're going to get together, do some more palming and discussions, and just keep your eyes peeled for any other cool upcoming events, either online or in person. So thank you very much. Hope you have a wonderful autumn equinox. Happy transition and the end of summer. And we will check in again next time. Thank you.